Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is Representative Richard Fulton and the civil rights movement, or his activities in civil rights during the period from 1962 to 1972. And of course, we have with us our guest to talk about Representative Fulton in Congress in a real sense during that period from 1962 to 1972, Mr. Robert Pickard. And of course, Mr. Pickard from Tennessee State University, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Haney.
And to tell you how delighted we are to have you here, Professor Pickard, because people often do not think in terms of many of our contemporary representatives being very, very significant, but I think that in dealing with Representative Fulton, you've identified a very, very significant individual, and especially a significant individual dealing with the civil rights movement. And so that's what we'd like to talk about, Mr. Fulton and civil rights from 1962 to 1972. But before we get into that, Professor Pickard, let's see if we can have you to talk about Professor Pickard,
okay.
In a real sense, to have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of eventually leading you to Tennessee State University, and then we'll talk about Representative Fulton and civil rights.
Well, Dr. Haney, I grew up in Nashville. I was born and raised here. And I grew up in the Waverly-Belmont area first, and then we moved when I was in high school over to the Green Hills area. And I have I'm entirely locally educated. I went to MTSU and graduated there in international relations. Then I went to graduate school at Eastern Michigan University, got a master's in history there, and master's in public administration at George Washington University, concentrating in public policy. And I spent a number of years overseas. I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years in the Philippines, where I met my wife, Mila. We've been married 30 years this year. And we, after Peace Corps, we worked for a while in the refugee camp at Bataan, Philippines, teaching Indo-Chinese refugees, Laotian, Cambodian, Vietnamese, and Chinese from all countries. And many people were resettling at that time here in Nashville. So I met some people I later encountered here. We moved on to Somalia. I worked for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees there, UNHCR, and I did administrative work. I managed a field office and set up the field office for them there. Came back to Washington, D.C., where I lived for about 10 years, and I was well, I was doing a number of things there. I worked on refugee programs with Catholic Charities, and also I did some political work. I was a political consultant for a while, and wound up moving back to Nashville in 1994. It's a great place to live.
Okay.
And I've been teaching at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State, since 2003, and we've been colleagues since 2007.
You know, listening at your autobiographical information here, Mr. Pickard, there are so many other topics that I think that we would also like to explore with you. You were involved with the refugee situation in Somalia, and these are all very, very current kind of topics, and certainly we want to talk to you eventually in reference to some of these things.
Absolutely.
But now, looking at the career of Representative Richard Fulton, we've got about 1 minute before the beginning of this first commercial break. But before we get into that break, let's see if we can sort of say some statements, make a couple of statements in reference to Representative Fulton.
Well, Congressman Fulton, of course, he represented a district as I was growing up from 1962 to 1975, and the first 10 of those years were very crucial years in this country. We had a lot of issues that were tearing the country apart. Civil rights was one, Vietnam the other, and just general lifestyle issues. Long hair became an issue and that sort of thing. And Fulton was always very much what I feel was progressive, and I think he was right. History has shown him right on these issues. And he was the only Southern congressman, the only congressman from one of the 11 former states of the Confederacy to vote for all 3 major civil rights bills of the 60s. He also opposed capital punishment at a time when it was very unpopular. And I think was an outstanding congressman for this district. And that's why I concentrated on his congressional career And I found out a lot of other things during my research about him that made me admire him even more.
And of course, over the next 25 or 30 seconds, we'll go into our first commercial break. But we want you to give us as much information as you wish to give us in reference to Congressman Fulton, because I think that many people know him, but perhaps they don't know him as you know him as a researcher who has had an opportunity, I think, to talk about him assisting in the passage of civil rights legislation and et cetera. People might not understand that and et cetera. So I want you to give us as much information as you possibly can. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.